Hare Krishna devotees, thank you for joining today's morning Srimad Bhagavatam reading. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranja Shodanandana Brajajanaranja Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Shama Sundara Radha Shama Sundara Radha Shama Sundara Radha Shama Sundara Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gaura Haribo 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 Nita Gaura Haribo. Thank you very much, devotees, for joining. We'll read the verse. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Text 26, Chapter 26, Text 30. Bhutanam Sir, before that, we will offer pranam mantras. Om Ajnanaatimirandasya Dhyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kalamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Viyuta Padakamalam श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपन्तान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तु ते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणि निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणि जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. We'll also read the prayers of Srimad Bhagavatam before proceeding. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udiraye शुश्रूषोषदधानस्य वासुदेव कथारुचिः स्यान्मत्सेवया विप्र पुण्यतीर्थानि सेवनात् शृण्वतां स्वकतः कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदयन्तस्तो ह्यभद्राणि विघ्नोति सुहृत्सताम् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवति उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी तदा रजस्तमो भाव आमलोभादयश्च ये चेतयेतैरनुविद्धं स्थितं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते विद्यते हृदय ग्रन्थिश्चित्यन्ते सर्वसंशयः क्रियन्ते चास्य कर्माणि दृष्ट एवात्मनीश्वरे. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. So today's verse that we are reading is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 34. Bhutanam chitradatritvam बहिरन्तरमेव च प्राणेन्द्रियात्मा दिष्ण्यत्वं नाभसो वृत्तिलक्षणम्. One more time. भूतानां चिद्रदातृत्वं बहिरन्तरमेव च प्राणेन्द्रियात्मा दिष्ण्यत्वं नाभसो वृत्तिलक्षणम्. Synonyms. What do we mean? Bhutanam, of all living entities, Chidradatritvam, the accommodation of whom, Bahihi, external, Antaram, internal, Eva, also, Cha, and Prana, of the vital air, Indriya, the senses, Atma, and the mind, Dishnyatvam, being the field of activities, Nabhasa, of the ethereal element, vritti, activities, lakshanam, characteristics. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. One more time, okay? The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and the internal existence of all the living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Therefore, the mind, the senses, and the vital force are living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are visible forms of the sense objects. The production of the visible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of the vital air and blood is its internal activity. The subtle forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms of photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of the ethereal element. That is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from the subtle form. Wow. Honestly, uh, it was really challenging for me to understand uh, both translation and purport. But I will take strength from Hari Parshad Prabhu. So, uh, whatever he has been speaking for the last 2 days, probably I will just speak in that line, uh, and we will read the translation and purport once again in that line. Hopefully, I will understand in a more deeper sense what Prabhupada is saying here. So we have been hearing this chapter, Sankhya Yoga, which comes after the glories of Bhakti Yoga. Kapila is explaining to Mother Devahuti. And Hariparshad Prabhu nicely explained using a flow chart that how the creation is starting in a big picture. If you see, originally there is Pradhana, which is unmanifested uh, amalgamation of everything. Uh, like so, it has everything, but in an unmanufactured form, including all the 24 elements required for creation. Um, so everything is there in the Pradhana. In fact, Prabhupada in his previous purports also writes that Pradhana is actually Brahman, but uh, Brahman in combination of modes of material nature. So the three modes together, they form a material amalgamation of the material, sum total of material, unmanufactured material element, which is pradhana. So it has everything required for the creation. But uh, like a chemical reaction, to start, you need some initial push, right? So who is giving that push? So the Lord gives that push in terms of he impregnates the consciousness of the living entities uh, along with the time factor. So he impregnates the pradhana. So that's when the uh, pradhana gets impregnated and the transformation starts. So Prabhu very nicely explained that pradhana is like a lady, and Lord is Purusha, and he impregnates uh, with his look, and now she is a pregnant lady, right? So that is Mahatattva, essentially. And Mahatattva is very effulgent uh, because it is sum total of all the consciousness of the living entities, which is impregnated with the Lord, is present now. And the name is also called Hiranmaya in the previous verses. So now this lady is already pregnant. So now, as the time progresses, she gives birth. The first product comes out of the pregnancy is ignorance. Sorry, um, false ego. Ego, essentially false ego. And uh, from false ego, again, further products come out. So this is like a cause and effect products coming out from each from false ego mixed with goodness. There are some elements come, and false ego mixed with passion. Some elements come, and false ego mixed with ignorance. Some elements come. So now we are at the section from 30, text 32 onwards. So it describes the elements or the products that come out uh, in combination of false ego uh, with mode of ignorance. Okay, basically they are the subtle and gross um, uh, elements, uh, which are the five gross elements, and the five tanmatras, which are again they're also related, but they're subtle elements of the gross metal nature. And also there is one principle Prabhupada explains that uh, the gross elements come from the subtle elements. And the first subtle element which comes in this combination is this sound, which Prabhu explained yesterday. And from the sound, the next product comes is the ether. And yesterday's verse explains the characteristics of the sound, and today's verse is explaining the characteristics of the uh, uh, ether. Right? And uh, just a big picture, the ether now will form the giving the next subtle elements and the gross elements. Like it becomes the basis for the next, uh, like it forms the basis for the touch, and from the touch it comes the air, right? So the air and touch are supposed to be come. They didn't come yet, but from this ether they will come out later as a cause and effects happening in with respect to time, right? So now we are, as we can see here, because air is going to come later and touch is also going to come later. So that has to be somehow within the uh, uh, within the ether, right? Or ether forms the basis of that. So that's why in this verse, uh, the mention of air here. So we'll read the translation again. The activities and characteristics of ethereal element. So that's what we are discussing now. So vritti lakshana, nabaso. Nabaso is ether. Vritti lakshana, activities and characteristics of ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of living entities, which is bhutanam chitra dhaturtva bahirantaram. So chitra dhaturtvam, the accommodation of the room. So basically, it forms the field where the all the living entities uh, stay. Because my understanding is like the living entities are like a anu, like the particles of consciousness, and they need the ether forms the background, right, in which they can stay as an external space and also internal uh, uh, existence. Uh, I didn't quite understood that uh, how ether becomes the both external and internal um, basis for all the living entities, but uh, we'll see how it goes as we move on to understand this verse. The namely field of activities of uh, vital air, the senses, and the mind. So the way I am understanding is internally the how it forms the basis, the field of activity is in terms of it provides the basis for the vital air, the senses, and the mind. So that is internal to the living entity. So the ether also forms the basis for these internal activities. That's namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. But I'm not quite clear how it happens. So now we will dwell a little more into the purport of the Srila Prabhupada. Before that, I want to read from the Bhagavata Subhadana point of view. So in this section, in 33, we go to the verse 34, characteristics of the ether. So Prabhu explains here, provides space for the living entities externally and internally. So it's a good thing. And acts as base for prana, that is the air, living life air, senses, and mind. So that's what mentioned in the Bhagavata Subhadana. And we will read here from this purport. The mind, the senses, and the vital force. So these are the three things which Bhagavad Gita also says that forms the basis, right? Ether forms the base of for prana, sense, and mind. So Prabhupada explained, the mind, the sense, and the vital force are the living entity. Prabhupada is saying vital force and life force. Air is also saying as prana, or the living entity, have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are invisible forms of the sense object. Hmm. So the Prabhupada, the way he's explaining is, sky forms the basis for the forms, and uh, internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Okay, that we covered one. And externally there are invisible forms of the sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects, which is going to come later, is the external activity of the eternal element. Okay. So, because the later, a little more grosser elements and tanmatras come later point of time. So because this verse is talking about the activities and the characteristics of the ether. So the external activity is the production of the invisible sense object, which are going to come, which is sense object later on. So, sorry, which is the touch. So that is one. We covered that activity part. And the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. So the activity is internal. This is the internal activity. Now, the later part. The subtle forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms of photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of ether element. So maybe I didn't connect like why Prabhupada is bringing this aspect here, but maybe he's trying to tell that the subtle forms, uh, just like the modern television, uh, reality, it is somewhere happened here, captured somewhere, and then we are seeing. But when we see, but it may not be the real thing, right? In the sense that we are only seeing the images, and the images are gone after we watch the whatever the show or the videos. So, but uh, ether forms the basis for this transmission. In fact, electromagnetism is mostly the science of electromagnetism doesn't need any medium for the propagation. It's a mediumless propagation of the information. So we can, that way we can connect with what Prabhupada is saying here, because all the images that we see, the videos and all the transmission happens through electromagnetic waves, right? So they're traveling through the ether, which is basically space or the sky, right? So maybe that way we can connect. So that is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific work, scientific research work, but it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle. So this is going to come later, right? Then mental activities are the psychological actions of thinking, feeling, willing, are also activities on the platform of literal existence. So this one is Bhagavatam is saying that acts of sense and mind also is are based in the ether, senses and mind. So here Prabhupada is saying here, mental activities are psychological actions of thinking, feeling, willing, are also activities on the platform of eternal existence. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. So the way I'm understanding here is, so the mind is more subtle, but whatever thoughts are happening in the mind will result into a body in the next life, right? So Prabhupada is saying that from the subtle gross comes up, right? So the statement of Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated with this. Because this verse is also saying that ether forms the basis for the later subtle elements which are going to come, subtle and gross elements which are going to come. Right? And mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from the subtle. So this is the process of the cause and effect. The creation is happening with the name Prabhu. Right? So in conclusion, we can say that this verse is specifically talking about the activities and characteristics of the ethereal element. Specifically, it forms the field of activity for the all the living entities or the souls, and then it also forms the basis of the field of activity for the vital aid, senses, and the mind. Right? And also, because it's the first gross element which came out from the first subtle element sound. So now in the process of creation, it's the link. So for the next subtle element, which is the touch is going to come from the touch again, air is going to come. So which is explained in the next verses of this chapter. So it's always challenging to understand the process of creation, and especially the Sankhya Yoga. But in the beginning of this chapter, it's explained that when we understand this process of creation, we will be liberated from this entanglement of the creation itself. So the way one time Prabhupada Maharaj gave in one of the retreats, that if we know how we enter into the room, hopefully we will know how we get out of the room. So that is the analogy, which is a graphic visual, which I remember right now, that how the creation happened, how the jiva got entrapped in this world. If you know, hopefully there is a chance to get out of the that entrapment as well. So with that, I will stop here, and I'm sure you have a better understanding of it was. We can discuss and talk about it more. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Creation and the Sankhya philosophy are extremely, it's very complicated, intertwined, and so many details, and it's always challenging. But somehow I think you spoke very coherently and consistently. So, did you say that? So, a question that came to my mind was like, did you say within the ether, this element is everything else? Is that what you said, Prabhu? Subsequently, they were coming. I think you're muted, Prabhu.
Yes, I don't know how to express it very well, Mataji, because we will read in the later verses that Earth has all the subtle elements and gross elements in it, because it is the last product which came out of all these transformations. So it has everything of all these transformations in it, right? So in that sense, it's actually the earth, the later products which will have the previous things in it. But if you see the other way, that if air, if ether doesn't have some basis of air, how does air come out of the ether,
Where does
right?
it come from? Yeah.
So that's why I thought about it, but I got confused. That means it's both ways it is happening.
Right.
So subtle ones have gross inbuilt in it, but as the time progresses, they come out, right? And at the same time, the product has also the previous one in it. So it's like for me, it's like a circular thing. Both has both in it.
Okay.
So
Yeah. The imagery I had was like a tissue box.
okay.
Like a Clorox wipe. You pull one wipe and it's pulling out the second wipe, and it's almost like, so this Pradhana
Mhm.
is is like a Clorox, and the very first tissue that comes out is a false ego. But anyway, I
Yeah.
think, I think what you're saying also makes sense.
Yeah.
But you also were saying that, how this ether is like a field of activity.
Mhm.
Uh, a thought came to my mind. It's not directly related to this, but um, in what do you call in Siddh, there is a, in Tamil Nadu, there is a kind of a medicine that's practiced, Siddha Vaidyam,
Mhm.
kind of like an Ayurveda, herbal, local, that kind of a thing. And long time back, one Siddha practitioner, he said how we get prana from
Mhm.
each of those five elements. So in like for example, he said, why when we breathe, we get prana from the air element. When we eat, we get prana from the earth element, water. Fire is through the sun. And then he said, space
Mhm.
comes, we get prana from the space when we sleep.
Ah,
And then in my world of teacher training, we see that, sleep is essential because it creates the space for children to digest the learnings that they have had. So in my teacher training, we are taught that, we teach them a subject matter, like you introduce a subject matter today,
Mhm.
but then you revisit it the next day. Then the
Mhm.
children have had that space to digest what they have received. They come with newer perspective. So we keep doing that. Like for example, any subject, geometry, right? Like you teach them for one full month, then you let it go to rest, then you again revisit that subject a few months later,
Mhm.
and then you go into a deeper concepts in geometry. So I was just relating that, like, because I used to keep thinking, how is sleep related to understanding subject matter? But then now when you were speaking, I was thinking that this originally speaking, this original creation, this whole, I'm speaking ether and space almost parallelly. It
Mhm.
is the field of activities where things move, where
Mhm.
other elements come up.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I didn't want to confuse, but I thought this is an interesting parallel, at least for me. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that point. Yeah. Certainly. Yeah. The closest I could visualize uh, ether as a field is the electromagnetic waves, right? Uh, as per the science, electromagnetic wave doesn't need any kind of medium to travel, right? And in fact, we are watching even television, all these how signals transmitted, right? Is they use electromagnetic wave in the all these signals, sound signals. They're what do you call? They call it modulation, I think. They modulate on the electromagnetic waves and then they transfer and then they demodulate when wherever they are. But uh, the transfer of this electromagnetic wave itself, it doesn't need any medium. But uh, as per our scripture, that means that no medium, what scientists say, is basically for us it's ether, ethereal element, which is again is a gross element, right? And uh, uh, that's where all these space or all these field of activities provided. So for the living entities as well as even the mind that you are able to, you were saying, right? The children needs that space. So when that space is given, the mental activities, it, yeah, uh, ether provides that space for the mental activities, for thinking, feeling, and building activities. So that's the closest I could go. Gopal Prabhu is, yeah, I'm sure he's an expert in this matter. Please correct me, Prabhu, and my understanding. If you have time, please give your realizations on this topic.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Pranam.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Very wonderful class, Prabhuji, and we see all the 5 elements are also present in our body, and how the weather is controlled outside. Mainly when the Amavasya and Purnami comes, that will be affecting our body also, they say. So the connection of Kham, that's the space we say, right, Prabhuji? Kham Mano Buddhi, from that part. And how is it also connected to the sound vibration, that the voice that we have? As Mataji explained, that is very nice. The space, give me some space, they say, right? That's also the word that we can use. Maybe because with that space, we can digest the thoughts. As the food is digested in the stomach, maybe the thoughts are digested with that sleep. And that's a very nice connection. Very next. We can think more about it also. And how is it connected with the voice, how we speak, and can you please explain that one, please?
If you are saying that actually the voice permeates the way I understand it's a sound. So the sound is actually the first tanmatra, which comes as part of the creation, the series of evolution happening when the ego, false ego, in combination with the mode of tamoguna. So when they mix, the first element which comes out is the tanmatra, sound.
Yeah.
And from the sound, the ether comes. So that is a link. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yes, probably.
Yeah. Sound is the first, then the ether. Ether is the next. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? So, there are. So we'll conclude here. Thank you very much for joining the reading today. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यश्च च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna.